The screaming never stopped that night. It started with one voice, deep, angry, echoing through the cell block like thunder, and then it multiplied. Metal clanged, boots pounded on concrete, alarms wailed. The red lights began to flash, painting the hallway in blood. 2 guards were down, one bleeding from his head. Somewhere in the chaos, an inmate named Reed was being dragged by his ankles, lifeless, his body disappearing into the smoke that filled the air. The prison was on fire, not from flames but from rage. Every locked door rattled, every man inside shouting words that didn't sound human anymore. And at the center of it all, standing on the second-tier walkway with blood splattered across his jumpsuit, was Torres, the man they called the warden of the yard, though he was no guard. He looked down at the chaos below him and smiled. "Welcome to hell," he said, his voice steady. And just like that, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the prison. No one slept that night. Not the guards. Not the inmates. Not the ones praying quietly behind their bars. Then silence. And that's where it all began. The story didn't start with the riot. It started 3 weeks before that, when Eli Carter first arrived at Blackridge Penitentiary, the prison everyone whispered about but no one wanted to believe was real. He had been sentenced to 15 years for armed robbery, but what scared him wasn't the years, it was the place itself. The guards called it the pit. No sunlight reached some of the lower tiers, and the walls were stained with decades of fear. The first thing Eli learned when he walked through those rusted gates was that no one was really in charge. The warden had authority only on paper. Inside, power belonged to the gangs, the Iron Serpents, the Saints, and the Black Fist. Each ruled their section of the yard, and each had their own code of loyalty. Eli had no gang. No allies. Just fear. During his first night, the sounds of prison life kept him awake. The yelling, the banging, the whispers through vents. Somewhere down the block, someone cried out and everyone ignored it. In Blackridge, that was rule number 1. Mind your own pain. The next morning at breakfast, Eli saw what real control looked like. The cafeteria was divided, invisible lines separated each group. The Serpents sat by the east wall, their tattoos marking them like badges. The Saints sat near the food counter, pretending to pray before eating, but everyone knew they ran the drug trade. The Black Fist controlled the guards. Rumor had it they paid off 3 officers with cigarettes, money, and silence. Eli grabbed his tray and tried to sit at an empty table. Before he could take a bite, a tall inmate with cold eyes slammed his hand on Eli's tray. "You're in my seat," the man said. Eli froze. The entire cafeteria seemed to stop. Even the guards didn't move. "I didn't know," Eli muttered. The man smiled, slow, cruel. "Now you do." He flipped Eli's tray to the floor. The beans splattered across his boots. Laughter filled the room, echoing off the concrete walls. Eli bent down to clean it up, his heart pounding. A small voice in his head told him to fight back. But the bigger voice, the voice of survival, told him to stay quiet. That's when Torres noticed him. Torres was watching from the next table, broad shoulders, scar across his jaw, eyes that never smiled. He was the leader of the Serpents. He leaned back in his chair and said to his crew, "That one's new. Let's see how long he lasts." From that moment, Eli knew his days of peace were over. By the second week, Eli had seen 2 fights, one stabbing and something worse, a guard sneaking cigarettes to Torres in exchange for cash. He started to realize that everything in Blackridge was a trade. Information. Protection. Even silence had a price. The guards pretended to control things, but everyone knew the truth. The gangs ran the prison and Torres ran the gangs. One afternoon, while Eli was scrubbing the floors near the yard gate, he overheard 2 inmates talking. "They say Torres killed a man in here and made it look like suicide. No one touches him. Even the guards don't." "Why?" "Because he owns them." Eli pretended not to listen, but his hands trembled as he held them up. That night, as the lights went off, Eli heard something strange, a knock from the next cell. 3 short taps, then silence. He didn't respond. Then it came again. "New guy," a voice whispered. "You awake?" Eli hesitated. "Yeah." "Don't talk too loud. You're in D block now. That means you belong to someone, you just don't know who yet." Eli's stomach turned. "What do you mean?" The voice didn't answer. Just laughed softly and said, "You'll find out soon." The next morning, a guard came by his cell with a message. "Torres wants to see you in the yard after lunch." Eli's heart sank. He'd seen what happened to men Torres wanted to see. Some didn't come back. Others came back broken. When the lunch bell rang, Eli walked out slowly, the weight of the prison pressing down on him. The yard was filled with noise, Basketball games, groups talking, deals being made. Torres stood near the fence, arms crossed, his eyes already on Eli. "Carter," Torres said as Eli approached. "You're new. I like new." Eli stayed quiet. Torres smirked. "You're not stupid. That's good. Stupid gets you killed in here." He took a step closer. "You're gonna work for me. Clean my cell, run errands, pass messages. You do that and maybe you get to sleep without someone cutting your throat." Eli's chest tightened. "And if I don't?" Torres smiled again. "Then I'll find someone who will, after they find you." The deal wasn't a choice. It was survival. For 2 weeks, Eli did everything Torres asked, delivering notes, cleaning, keeping his head down. But every night the guilt grew heavier. He was helping a man everyone feared, and he could feel the darkness of the prison crawling under his skin. Until one night, when everything exploded. Eli was returning from the kitchen when he saw 2 guards arguing in the corridor. One of them, Officer Briggs, shouted, "I'm done covering for him, do you hear me?" The other guard hissed back, "Keep your voice down, you'll get both of us killed." Eli froze. They were talking about Torres. Suddenly, a door slammed somewhere behind them. The lights flickered. Briggs turned around, and there was Torres standing in the shadow, smiling. The hallway went silent. Torres stepped forward slowly. "Gentlemen," he said. "Talking about me again?" The guards didn't answer. One of them reached for his radio, but he was too slow. Torres lunged. The radio hit the floor. A punch. A scream. Blood splattered across the concrete. Eli backed away, heart pounding, breath caught in his chest. Torres turned to him, his voice calm and terrifying. "You didn't see anything, right?" Eli nodded quickly. "No, sir." Torres smiled. "Good." Then he leaned close and whispered, "Welcome to hell." Eli didn't sleep that night. The scene replayed in his mind again and again. The sound of the guard's radio hitting the concrete, the faint echo of Torres' voice, the metallic scent of fear in the air. He sat on his bunk, staring at the wall, his heart pounding so hard it felt like the walls could hear it. When morning came, the cell doors opened as usual, but the entire block felt different. The usual chatter, the yelling, the laughter, all gone. The air was thick and quiet. The guards moved faster than usual, eyes forward, no jokes, no small talk. It was like everyone was pretending nothing happened. But Eli knew what silence meant in Blackridge. Silence was danger. Silence meant someone was cleaning up the mess. By breakfast the rumors had started. "They say a guard quit last night." "Nah man. He's dead." "Torres did it." "You sure?" "Sure as these bars." Eli ate slowly, not looking up from his tray. Torres sat 3 tables away, calm as ever, laughing softly with his crew like nothing had happened. Every once in a while, his eyes flicked toward Eli, not long enough to be noticed but just enough to remind him who held the leash. That was when a guard, Officer Miles, came over and dropped a folded paper next to Eli's tray. He didn't speak, just walked away. Eli hesitated before opening it. Inside, written in rough handwriting, were 3 words. "Keep your mouth shut." The paper trembled in his hands. He didn't know who wrote it, Torres, a guard, or someone else entirely, but it didn't matter. The message was clear. In Blackridge, secrets were currency and he was now in debt. That afternoon Eli was assigned to laundry duty. He didn't complain. It was better than being on the yard, less eyes, less noise. The room smelled of bleach and damp cotton. Machines hummed. A few inmates worked quietly, each lost in his own thoughts. An older man named Harris ran the place, a lifer with white hair and calm eyes. He'd been inside longer than most guards had been alive. Everyone respected him. "You new here?" Harris asked, folding sheets. Eli nodded. 2 weeks. Harris chuckled. 2 weeks and you already look like you seen a ghost. Eli forced a weak smile. "You could say that." Harris studied him for a moment, then leaned closer. "You crossed paths with Torres, didn't you?" Eli froze. "How'd you know?" Harris pointed at Eli's hands. "You're shaking." "Only 2 things make a man shake in here, withdrawals or Torres." Eli didn't answer. Harris sighed. "Listen to me, kid. Torres ain't just another inmate. He's got half the staff in his pocket. Guards bring him what he wants when he wants. They call him the warden for a reason." Eli frowned. "Why doesn't the real warden do something?" Harris smirked. "You think the warden wants trouble? He gets his paycheck, keeps his head down, and lets Torres run the show. That's how it works here. You'll learn." The hum of the washing machines filled the silence that followed. Then Harris said something that chilled Eli to the bone. "Word is Torres is building something. A plan. Bigger than fights or drugs. Something that'll shake this whole place. Eli's voice dropped. What kind of plan? Harris just looked at him, a long heavy look, and said, "You don't want to know, son. Just stay out of his way." That night, as Eli returned to his cell, he saw Officer Briggs' locker being cleaned out by 2 guards. No one spoke. No questions were asked. It was as if Briggs had never existed. Eli felt a sudden chill. He sat on his bunk, head in his hands. Every instinct screamed at him to tell someone, the warden, the police, anyone. But in Blackridge, snitches didn't last a day. He thought about his mother, her voice, her letters, her promise to wait for him. He thought about how easily people disappeared in this place. And then he made his choice. He'd survive whatever it took. Days turned into weeks. Eli became a ghost, moving silently from one job to another, keeping his head down. But even ghosts are seen eventually. One afternoon, while cleaning near the control tower, he overheard 2 guards talking. "You hear what Torres is planning?" one whispered. "Yeah. He's talking to the serpents, the saints, even the blacks. Says he's got a deal." "With who?" "Outside." Eli froze behind the wall. Outside? That word echoed in his mind. No one had contact outside unless they were smuggling or bribing. What was Torres planning? An escape? A riot? He tried to move quietly, but his broom hit the wall with a thud. The guards stopped talking. One of them peered around the corner. "Who's there?" Eli panicked and started sweeping again. "Just janitor duty, sir." The guard stared at him for a moment too long before saying, "You didn't hear a thing." Eli nodded. "No, sir." The guard smiled thinly. "Good boy." That night Eli couldn't sleep again. His mind raced. He wanted to believe it was paranoia, but deep down he knew something was coming. The yard felt too calm. The inmates too quiet. Even Torres had stopped showing up at meals. And then 2 nights later he found out why. It was lights out when Eli heard the footsteps, soft, careful, deliberate. He opened his eyes. Someone was at his cell door. A folded piece of paper slid through the bars. Eli picked it up. The handwriting was the same as before, rough, fast. This time it said, "Tomorrow. Midnight. Be ready." His breath caught. He looked down the hallway, but the figure was already gone, swallowed by darkness. The next day passed painfully slow. Every minute felt stretched. Every sound felt louder than usual, the clang of a gate, the buzz of the PA, the scrape of metal on metal. By evening the guards seemed nervous. They paced more, whispered more. Eli's pulse quickened. At midnight it began. First came the power outage. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. The block plunged into darkness. Then came the sound, not shouting but rumbling. The sound of hundreds of men moving in sync. Doors opening that shouldn't open. Eli pressed his face to the bars, eyes wide. Somewhere down the tier a voice shouted, deep, commanding. It was Torres. Now. Suddenly, every alarm in the building exploded. The blue lights flashed wildly. Eli saw inmates flooding the hallway, some armed with makeshift tools, others running for cover. Guards shouted orders. The air filled with noise, smoke, and chaos. And through the confusion Eli saw Torres, calm, confident, walking straight through the madness like a general leading an army. He looked up toward the control tower and shouted something Eli couldn't hear. The next second, an explosion of sparks burst from the electrical panel. The entire cell block went red. And that's when Eli realized, this wasn't a fight. It was a takeover. Blackridge wasn't a prison anymore. It was a battlefield. The alarms still echoed long after the chaos ended. The prison was drenched in the cold blue light of emergency lamps, flickering off concrete walls that seemed to breathe. The smell of smoke and metal hung in the air. Blood wasn't visible anymore, but the fear was. Every face looked hollow, every movement careful. No one wanted to draw attention. No one wanted to be next. Eli sat on the edge of his bunk, motionless. Hours had passed since the riot began, but in his head the noise wouldn't stop. The shouts, the stomping boots, the sound of locks snapping open and slamming shut. Across from him, his cellmate, Marcus, a quiet man with tired eyes, finally spoke. "You saw what happened tonight," he whispered. "That wasn't just a fight. That was a message." A message. Eli replayed that word in his mind. He remembered the note, the threats, and the way Torres had stood calm in the middle of chaos like he was directing it. If this was a message, it wasn't meant for the guards. It was for everyone inside these walls. Torres ruled the yard, but tonight proved he ruled the dark too. By morning the prison was on lockdown. Every inmate confined to their cells. No breakfast, no yard, no talking. The guards moved in pairs now, their radios crackling with short, coded messages. Through the narrow slit of his door, Eli could see the tension in their eyes. Even the men paid to control the chaos looked scared. Hours dragged into the afternoon. The air grew hotter, heavier. Then a voice came over the speaker, a cold, flat voice. Cell inspections, Block D. One at a time. When Eli's door opened, 2 guards stepped in, their boots echoing. One began searching the bunk while the other questioned him. You see anything last night? Eli shook his head. The guard leaned closer. Careful, Carter. You start seeing too much, you might end up like Reed. The name hit him like a punch. Reed. The inmate who'd vanished in the smoke. Rumor said he was gone, dead maybe. But no one ever found him. The guards left, but their warning stayed behind, heavy and invisible. That night, Marcus whispered again. They're moving things. Torres is planning something big. That's why they shut us in. Eli frowned. How do you know? Marcus leaned closer, his face lit only by the faint blue bulb. Because I used to work for him. Eli froze. The words hit like a thunderclap in the silence. Marcus explained how the gangs moved contraband through laundry routes and kitchen shipments. Everything controlled by Torres. Guards help. Some for money, some for safety. But nobody crosses him. Not twice. Eli sat back, his mind racing. Everything suddenly made sense. The threats, the missing man, the tension in the guard's eyes. This wasn't a prison anymore. It was a kingdom and Torres was its king. The next morning, the lockdown ended abruptly. Doors clanged open one by one. The air smelled of disinfectant and damp concrete. A guard yelled, "Yard time." It felt like freedom even if it lasted only an hour. Eli and Marcus stepped into the sunlight, but it wasn't peaceful. The yard was quiet, too quiet. Groups huddled together, whispering. Torres stood in the middle, surrounded by his loyal men. He nodded at Eli just once and turned away. Marcus stiffened. Don't look at him, he said under his breath. That nod means something. Before Eli could ask, a commotion erupted near the gym fence. 2 inmates arguing, shoving, shouting. Guards rushed over trying to break it up. But Eli's eyes were fixed elsewhere. Torres had walked calmly toward the chaos, his expression blank. Then as if on cue the power flickered. The blue light returned and the yard froze. In that moment Eli understood. This wasn't random. The fights, the fear, the silence, all of it was Torres' control. He was showing the new inmates who owned every second of their lives. Marcus grabbed Eli's arm. We have to go. Now. The sound that followed wasn't loud, just a small thud behind them. A body hitting the ground. The yard filled with gasps, then silence. A single guard shouted for backup, his voice breaking. Torres didn't move. He just turned his head slightly, meeting Eli's eyes through the haze of dust and blue light, and smiled. Eli's heart stopped. He knew that smile meant one thing. The next chapter of his nightmare had just begun. The air felt colder that morning, though the sun had already risen above the prison walls. The yard was quiet. Too quiet. Eli could still see Torres' eyes in his mind, that calm, taunting look. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. Guards shouted orders as the inmates were escorted back inside, but their voices sounded distant, hollow, like echoes in a tunnel. Every step Eli took through the concrete corridors felt heavier. He could sense it, something was coming. Something worse. Back in the cell Marcus was pacing. His eyes darted toward the door every few seconds. We can't stay here, he muttered under his breath. They'll come tonight. Who? Eli asked. Marcus stopped and looked straight at him. Torres' men. You've been noticed. He doesn't like attention he didn't plan. Eli's chest tightened. Why me? Marcus sighed. Because you looked him in the eye. In here that's not allowed. The day dragged on painfully slow. The guards avoided eye contact. Conversations were whispers. Lunch was silent. The smell of bleach filled the air as janitors scrubbed the hallway floors, not because they were dirty, but because someone wanted everything clean before something happened. When night fell, the prison transformed again. The blue lights hummed, flickering faintly over the corridor walls. The hum of the generators mixed with distant murmurs. Somewhere down the block, a door slammed. Then another. Marcus turned off the small radio on their shelf. Listen, he whispered. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Eli's heart began to race. He could hear keys clinking, faint voices. Then silence. Total silence. The kind of silence that swallows sound. A few minutes passed before the lights flickered again. Then shouts. Heavy boots running. The alarm began to wail. Eli jumped to his feet. Marcus was already at the door, peering through the slot. "What's happening?" Eli asked. Marcus didn't answer. He backed away, eyes wide. "It's them," he said quietly. Down the corridor, shadows moved fast. Blue light flashed across walls and faces, distorted by smoke. Guards shouted commands, but it all blurred together, just sound and chaos. Then through the haze Eli saw him, Torres. Calm, walking straight through the confusion, his hands behind his back like a man taking a stroll. The alarms didn't seem to touch him. The chaos moved around him, not through him. For a brief second their eyes met again. The same calm stare. The same chilling smile. And then Torres disappeared into the smoke. Moments later the sprinklers came on. Cold water rained down through the cell block, washing away the haze but not the fear. The sirens faded, replaced by the heavy sound of water hitting metal. Eli sat down slowly, drenched, shaking. Marcus leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Neither of them spoke for a long time. When the morning finally came, guards moved through the halls like ghosts. Their faces were pale, their voices quiet. The warden himself walked through the block, surrounded by officers. Eli caught a glimpse of him as he passed, tight jaw, eyes filled with something between anger and fear. No one knew what had happened in the night. But everyone knew something had changed. Torres' control wasn't just rumor anymore, it was law. That afternoon, during a brief inspection, Eli noticed something strange on his bunk. A small folded paper, damp from the night's chaos. He hesitated before opening it. Inside, scrawled in rough handwriting, were 3 words. "You're not safe." He looked around quickly, but no one was near. Marcus had been taken for questioning. The guards were gone. Only the hum of the blue lights filled the air. Eli sat on the bunk, holding the note tightly. He could feel his pulse pounding through his hands. He didn't know who wrote it, a warning or a threat. But deep down he knew one thing: Torres wasn't finished. As the lights flickered once more, Eli stared through the narrow bars of his cell, into the dark corridor beyond. Somewhere, unseen, someone was watching. And the nightmare of Blackridge Penitentiary was far from over.